Police close in on suspects in airport robbery. A man was shot 5 times after attacking police with a cutlass. And internationally, Trump enforces new travel ban affecting 12 countries. Now for the details. With the PNM's internal election just 2 weeks away, the People's Champion slate has threatened legal action over delays in receiving the official voters list and polling station information. On June 7th, attorney and candidate St. Clair O'Neill gave the party's Elections Supervisory Committee until June 9th to deliver the data, calling the delay unfair to non-incumbents and damaging to their campaign efforts. He also raised concerns about ballot security in the week-long gap between voting day and the announcement of results. The committee promised to finalize and share listings next week, but O'Neill said the response was unacceptable and claimed it creates an uneven playing field. Police say they're making progress in the investigation into the robbery at Piarco International Airport. On June 6, 2 men, one armed, robbed the Peter Pitt outlet and escaped with an undisclosed sum. Acting Police Commissioner Junior Benjamin told media on June 8th that experts are reviewing CCTV and other evidence, and he expects a breakthrough soon. Homeland Security Minister Roger Alexander visited the site and criticized the lack of perimeter security. He pledged to monitor improvements daily. Police say patrols will increase with tactical squads deployed and a stronger visible presence planned both inside and outside the airport. A man is hospitalized in stable condition after being shot by police during a confrontation in Kelly Village, Caroni. Officers were responding to reports of a man throwing objects at a neighbor's house on June 6th. When they identified themselves, they were met with glass bottles and saw a man advancing with a cutlass. Police say the suspect ignored commands to drop the weapon and threatened an officer, who then fired 6 shots. The man was hit in the stomach, thigh, ankle, and calf and remains under police guard at Mount Hope Hospital. Internationally, a new U.S. travel ban signed by President Donald Trump has taken effect, barring citizens from 12 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, and Haiti. The ban announced last week also imposes partial restrictions on 7 other countries. Trump said the move is meant to protect Americans from potential threats and may be revised depending on global security changes. Exceptions include lawful U.S. residents, certain visa holders, and athletes attending major international events. Critics have called the order discriminatory, while supporters argue it's a necessary step for national security. Some affected countries like Chad have already begun retaliatory measures. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Hello, Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Mark Anthony Peter, and welcome to Breakthrough right here on WESN Content Capital. Thank you so much for joining us. Right, obviously, joining me at the Breakthrough table is my co-host, the one, the only, thank God, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
I don't know how I'm supposed to take that. Thank God there's only one of me. Or thank God I'm here. Is it a positive or is it a negative? Listen.
Yes.
Listen. Mark Anthony Peter, you'll be only so lucky if there was more than one of me in your life.
I beg to differ. I beg to differ a little bit. All right? But that's okay.
That's all right. You know what? I approve of that message. We should really be clothing Mark Anthony Peter.
I could barely handle
to do all the work that needs to be done in society.
Oh, please no.
Just unlimited Mark clones.
Please no.
Mark will get it done.
I barely woke up this morning, please no.
I have to wake up earlier than you.
That is true. And talk about politics, my God.
Yes,
anyway,
I know, right?
on much easier topics, this breakthrough is a much easier
Is
thing
it?
from.
Yeah. Industry-wise, it's not always so easy.
Well, I mean, we're here to educate as much best as possible and try to understand.
This
whole arts and culture industry that we're in.
I will not begin to say that I educate people. I just say what I think. And if it's useful to you, that you would make that determination. I ain't so arrogant to say I'm going to educate the masses with my opinion because my opinion is so right. No.
We're hoping to have good discussions to be able
There you
to,
go. There you go.
To, sort of expand the conversations around certain things. Speaking of which, last week we were talking about
the concert that
the concert where it sort of created a national discussion on what the arts and culture industry
more than one.
standards. Yeah, yes.
Because that foreign exchange question is a big question too, but that we could leave that for another
That's
show.
for talking.
Yeah.
That's for breakthrough. But no, it started, and it's still going. It started discussions about what our industry standards are and how we approach upkeeping these standards, right? Yes, we have a lot of access to education in terms of honing your skills, and many of those institutions do teach, do make sure that you're carrying yourself with a bit of a professionalism and making sure that everything is as professional as possible. Because at the end of the day, this is a job that we do. This is work. But in our discussion last week, we were sort of talking about the sort of laissez-faire sort of approach to the industry and how.
I think that's a trade thing, just in general.
Well, based on one of the blogs that we referenced, the writer said, a lot of these things can sort of reinforce the stereotypes of Caribbean standards.
Right. Okay.
The
right.
regional
Yes.
thing,
Yes.
Right. And
that was
Melissa Jimenez, the general manager of Music TT. She put out a blog post, and she's still writing on certain things. By the way, I saw something where it seems like the One Caribbean Festival and Island e-tickets are going at it because they did promise the refunds, and then Island e-tickets is like, no, we're not doing that.
We could get into that.
That is a talking point discussion. But again, this is just an example of how the things are continuing. But what we're going to talk about here is just sort of how the industry standards are basically, and are they failing? Are they successful? What are we going to do? And joining us for this discussion is singer, voice teacher, and producer, Miss Natalia Doppel. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And also performing veteran.
Well,
with experience.
I do have the grey hairs to qualify me for that.
I'm not too far behind, don't worry. I'm not too far behind. Although I think men kind of get it easier with the grey. Unfairly
you just become like distinguished or something.
Yeah. I get to act more entitled and pompous than even before.
So, Natalia, you've performed. You've had this career, as you said, veteran. You've had this career of performing in different organizations, different professional spaces, at least maybe most likely on every stage in Trinidad and Tobago, and across the region and across the world as well. And you have this sort of this experience not just here but internationally as well. What are some of the things? I'm just going to come right over with the question. Are our industry standards sort of failing, and do we have more industry standards that are failing rather than more than that are pretty much successful, given the conversation around, this whole, the festival that happened and, dropping out of artists and how we deal with crisis management? Because I feel like, for me personally, I feel like, yes, I'm working towards my craft to perform well on stage, but I feel like I'm always in defense mode of trying to avoid crisis and trying to avoid risk all of the time. And that could be that could just cause a whole lot of anxiety. But what are your thoughts on our industry standards and how can we, and we'll get to how can we improve them?
Yeah, I think first we need to acknowledge that there is definitely space for amateur performance. There's definitely space for people who wish to actually grow to professional standards while having a job elsewhere to pay bills. We also have, you know, small, say, local productions that do not require professional, how should I put it, professional management.
Like all the bells and whistles.
All the bells and whistles, because you can hire capable people to do the lights for you. You can hire capable people who will do your stage management. And then all you have to do is show up and sing your heart out. And that exists for a reason, because it is good to have that sort of community theater level music happening, right? So we have the Best Village, we have the choirs, we have people that can literally just show up somewhere, play the instrument, and all of the technical aspects are supervised by capable professionals. That exists for a reason. And I do think, though, what we lose in the Caribbean is any sense of specialization.
Okay.
And by that I mean, like, a lot of people feel that they need to be a one-stop shop for everything. Okay? So I would say, like, in my case, I recognized early on that I was capable of doing a lot of things, but I actually only enjoyed doing some of them.
Right.
And so as I've sort of gotten into this sort of, I would call it like a mature era of my, let's just call me, I'm at a mature era in my.
They have rock stars touring in the 80s. Yeah, that old.
Well, when I say mature, I'm saying I'm just taking ownership of the things I will say no to.
Right.
Okay.
Intentionally.
So mature not in terms of age, but your perspective.
I'm using it as a absolute, like, beneficial, positive statement.
I get to curate what I say yes and no
I
to.
can curate what I do, what I choose to put my energy into, and at this point as well, the things that I do not actually want to engage with. I have loads of students who I can recommend for opportunities that I no longer want.
Yes.
Okay? And so this means scaling back on things that maybe some people might miss. It means people going, oh gosh, I don't see you doing X, Y, Z anymore, right? And this is intentional because it means that I get to spend my time doing the things that I actually do enjoy and that I actually want to specialize in and spend more time in. So it means that I perform less, but when I do perform, I feel like it has a greater impact, as well as I personally feel fulfilled as a professional.
And it's good that because you said, you know, it's not just a matter of, oh, I don't want to do this, let me just give it to any student. You're also giving the student is at that stage in their life, in their career, where they sort of need
that space.
So you're giving them that space as well.
And so I have to withdraw myself from this space.
That takes a lot of self-awareness that a lot of people don't have.
Well,
but I like that.
When you say that part of being a professional is, look, one, can I commit fully to this project, right? And if I can't, should I? And to have that level of motivation, best foot forward kind of scenario. But then there's also the fact that, look, I also need to understand that as you get older and there's more demands on your time, even if you want to commit to some projects, maybe it just doesn't fit into your schedule. And when you're younger, you can kind of jerry-rig it and shoehorn it in. But you can't give your 100%, you know, especially with a vocalist. Health is very important for a vocalist.
Yes, and mental stability, all of these things. You know, you have to have that time to rest and recover. And on top of that, you have to learn to filter the advice you will receive from your community, okay? And what I mean by that is, I very often, after shows, I get a chorus of very excited suggestions of things I should be doing. Okay, and I, as a professional now, am much better able to filter that enthusiasm and divert it towards things that I think are more worth my time, right? So let's say someone says, you know, Natalia, it would be so wonderful if you did a performance with Josh Groban. You've got to bring him to Trinidad.
Okay, yeah, that's a little bit,
Right, and this is not to say that that is actually a request I have had, but I'm also not saying that that's not a request I have had. Okay, it's that I need to know and I need to be aware of what it takes to bring in an international professional, which I have in the past.
Right.
I have brought in international professionals in the past, but what I have not done is bring in international people in the past who have management. Okay? So I have always negotiated with people that I have met as individuals and who are wonderful performers who nobody knows the name of,
Right.
you know. So one of the people that I brought in the past is Diego Godoy Gutierrez, who is right now singing all over Europe and doing a fantastic job. He's paired with some really big names. He's doing fantastic. I've also brought, and he was a Chilean that I met when I was in Peru, okay? I also brought a pianist from Poland, who I met in Peru. I brought a wonderful mezzo-soprano that I knew in England, when I was at school, in New York. And she came down and she sang in an opera with us. I brought down people from Canada. I brought in Ronald Sam has come back to do concerts with us. And so these are people that I have a personal connection with.
Yes.
I did not have to negotiate with management to bring them down here. And because they understand who I am and what I was trying to do with the Pico Platt Foundation, a lot of them accepted a lot less than maybe they typically would accept, mostly because they were excited to come to a place that they've never been before. And I make sure that they're comfortable while they're here, and they have a little stipend money. And at the end of the concert, a couple times, I will be very honest about this, a couple times the shows did not make enough money. And because I had a personal relationship with them, I was able to negotiate a smaller fee.
Right.
Okay? This is if you stay in your lane and if you recognize the level that you're at.
Right.
Okay.
And you make personal connections with people who are able to get on your bandwagon and try to help out. So they would do master classes while they were here. They, I did concerts of Caribbean music written by a Caribbean composer and stuff. These are all things that I feel very strongly about, that we should be doing more of our own music, actually composing it for performance on stages around the world. And so we got that done. We commissioned that from a Trinidadian who is based in England. And so that since then has been, arranged for orchestra in different places. All of these things happen not by accident, not, just out of left field. I don't just pick up the phone and randomly cold call somebody who has, who has a #1 hit right now on the radio and say, yeah, whatever he need, I will make all that back in sponsorship, man. Yes. Okay, and yes, sometimes, organizing US dollars is tricky, even at the level. I'm nowhere near, I've never operated at the level anywhere near. I have not smelt that kind of funding.
That's enough to make
but at the same time, I am comfortable at the level I am at. I'm not worried about losing my house if I cannot afford to pay an artist.
So I have an interesting thought, and it's curious that you started off with saying there's space for amateur choir and community performances and stuff like that. Because arguably, yes, calypso and soca and stuff, it went through its amateur phase into professional commercial phase, and that's like the biggest commercial thing locally, right? Jamaica's dancehall and reggae, that's what we have. But we, of course, now with more singers being educated, like they have it easier than you. You're here to teach them, but there was no Natalia Dopwell necessarily to teach you per se.
I had an excellent voice teacher. What I did not have was access to tertiary education locally.
Yes.
Because for vocalists at that point in time,
so now
back
we have
in the olden days,
a higher level of formal training, right? So there's a greater proclivity to push more for professionalism. But I do think that for certain things like musical theater and various contemporary singing and other art forms, not soca and chutney soca and calypso, right? The amateur community roots are so recent that perhaps maybe the maturity, as you pointed out, has not necessarily always caught up, and we can't just operate like how we used to then. And you've actually straddled, I would say you are in a healthy because you're doing it responsibly. You're putting down your foundation. As you say, you're staying in your lane. You were part of the community amateur performance space. Now you're more in the professional and academic space, right? And you're doing it stably. You're not overreaching, and you kind of understand how to be, when I need to be professional and when I have room to still be informal, because we ain't reached, you know, multi-million-dollar deals yet, right? But like, I do wonder if to some extent, not everybody like fully understands that. Either they try to reach too far, or they try to stay too informal, and everything is a lie.
The culture has just not caught up.
It doesn't know where it's at. It doesn't know the lane.
Okay,
Right.
it's kind of a limbo.
It makes the mistake both ways.
Kind of a limbo sort of thing.
I think it's you know, it's a negotiation time, because there's I would say, you know, there's a generation that was accustomed to doing things a certain way, and they have established their way of doing it for 40, 50, 60 years. And then you have a younger generation who are being taught in a college sort of setting, an academic setting, and they're leaving school with an expectation of a certain level of engagement.
That's very important, because I remember speaking to a friend, and we were sort of observing how like the new graduates are sort of existing in the professional space, and I had to tell him, listen, you and I had community exposure before we went into university. Many of them did not. Many of them just went from school straight into university. And yes, so they have this expectation. So when they get out into the world, they're like, wait, this is not what I was,
there's also a return culture shock, a reverse culture shock for people like me who trained abroad and then returned and was like, what? No one wants to sit down and listen to an entire recital of classical music? What's this? What's this?
I mean, I would argue part of it is just to find the audience in a lot of niche markets in TNT. But part of it is the audience they're not accustomed to that.
The audience is not accustomed. And I have to say, over the decade plus that I've been back in the country, the audience has also grown in sophistication, and it's not necessarily the older audience members.
That is true. Yeah.
It is younger audience members, and when you go to see, for instance, the National Philharmonic, when you go to vocal recitals, when you go to chamber music recitals, you see a very wide spread of age, very diverse in terms of all ethnicities, all ages, all socioeconomic levels. Yes. Because there, especially in this era where music is more accessible. It's not, a lot of young people no longer listen to the radio. I don't think people understand that younger than a certain age, they are not used to advertisements anymore. Okay, so when they want to listen to music, they're on Spotify or they're on YouTube, and they are specifically looking for what they want to listen to. So, for instance, my kids, they enjoy smooth jazz. Okay, that's
at the
age of 8 and 11.
Wow.
Okay, and if you look for it, it exists. So if they want to listen to a smooth jazz interpretation of Zelda music, it exists. If they want to listen to smooth jazz version of Mario Brothers music, it exists. Okay, so when you just to the older generation that literally is used to just turning on the radio and letting the radio decide what they listen to, has one kind of
because when you were growing up, it was what?
It was whatever was on the radio. And then you would put and you put the cassette in and you would record so that you could later on go back and listen to that thing that you recorded badly.
I was far too lazy to
I had cassettes upon cassettes of things that I recorded from the top 40 and but that was a different era. We just didn't have access to quite as much music. So even when I was learning arias in foreign languages, I'm always telling my students, listen, y'all just have to go on Google. And just find the lyrics and then translate the lyrics. It will take you 2 minutes. Whereas I would be handed a dictionary, an Italian-English dictionary, go translate your aria. And I would find out what the aria sounds like when my teacher sung it for me.
In fact,
I didn't have YouTube to listen to 5 or 6 or 10 different versions
You're
of
actually
the
making it
song.
sound harder than it is because you don't even actually have to translate it. There will be a translation.
Yes.
That's what
But
you
I
meant.
always tell,
Yeah.
No, but I tell them not to do that.
Oh.
Because if you look for the translation, a lot of
Literally.
times it's a rhyming translation that you could potentially sing. So it doesn't line up properly.
Okay.
So you're not gonna, it's not actually, sometimes it's completely
It does
nonsensical.
take some work because it kind of has to,
Listen,
there's
this is,
certain
why,
nuances.
this is why I say media literacy is going to replace literacy as being the most important thing. Because I'm sure you could find the proper translation that you're looking for if you know how to find
to
it.
know how to do it, because
yes.
it can't just
There
be
are
one
specific
source.
sources. There are specific sources that will give you a better
Yeah.
word-for-word translation.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if, as a nation, outside of our already established commercial enterprises, our arts and performing arts, particularly with music, it's almost like if now we have our education is getting jump-started, turbocharged, and the industry part of it is like fighting and struggling to catch up.
It's not
To
yeah, it's
catch
not
up.
catching
And some people, I think, also have a lot to lose with that shift towards professionalism in the industry, because I think a lot of amateur organizations rely heavily on adult amateurs,
Yes.
which do exist.
Yes.
I have a lot of adult amateur students, and I know a lot of adult amateurs who very passionately, after their day job, will go out and spend a lot of time in the community, you know, singing and performing and helping things get done. But that culture is one that I think they need to make sure that they are satisfying the needs of those individuals.
Right.
As opposed to just assuming that this is the only outlet for those individuals.
Because the space used to just be those were the performances available, right? If
And
you
that was
wanted certain styles of music for musical theater and stuff, right?
Whatever they give you, and also that they have this, their audience has one specific music that they expect to hear when they show up. So it's a certain programming.
One of the things that I think, coming back to that, you also mentioned, you know, you had relationships with people. That's easy to manage when it's a one-on-one sort of thing. But when an organization sort of grows, those sort of informal sort of ways of dealing with things doesn't always work, because the thing is this big, and you can't just go off of the word of whoever is the director of the organization and things like that.
It's not just music. I have seen just about any informal, non-professional group for individual activity, whatever, after work stuff that I have been a part of, seen, heard of, whatever. Just the propensity of the social structure to not stand up because it reaches a certain point where it's just hard to manage.
Yes, exactly. And you also sometimes have friction between board members who are not active members, vocal members, but simply sit on a board to manage financial. But they then try to manage things like the repertoire and the leadership people, and you know, and these kind of frictions are, again, a friction that's caused by now trying to regulate these groups more, because they now have to maintain their charitable status or their national,
but not just that. I think there's something to be said where the older generations are accustomed to a certain way, because that was all that was available to them at the time, right?
And there was no one trying to regulate
But the problem now is that the younger generation, and you might not be quite aware, like just how the new skill set has upended.
No, yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Because when you and I think about the choirs that we were in, when I say the actual personal grouping, say in the early 2000s, and the skill level that's now available out there now, it is completely different. And it's no fault to people back then, because everybody had to do the best they could, right?
I will say that something that I keep getting asked, always by older audience members, is, so where are you based?
Wow.
Oh, as in you need to be in an organization.
Which organization, which
It's
choir?
no, which country?
Oh.
There is an assumption that and this is again coming from
At a
the
certain
older generation, not the younger generation. The younger generation understand
Yes.
that you can choose to have a professional career in Trinidad.
Right.
But the older generation, there was nothing available for a professional to do. So Trinidad is the place that you retire to.
What do they think of people like Eddie and
But Eddie has a doctorate in education, in
Right.
mathematics or something like that.
I mean,
he has
he
a
is
whole
an
other job.
international competition winning
Yes,
vocalist.
but
huh?
he is not. But it's not his job.
Right.
his job.
Okay.
It's
okay.
not his job.
known
He
for
has
the
a
And
whole-
so,
education.
Wendell
Yes.
is in communications
Communications.
and so on
yes.
and so on.
Yes.
Or-
But you have a huge population of musical professionals who left Trinidad
Yes.
and would come back, do a concert, and then leave
Yes, like
again.
Etienne Charles, yeah.
Oh, there's tons of them. Tons of them.
Although one of his
right?
contemporaries, Tony Paul, seemingly does a lot of work.
Because
Yeah.
he has a teaching job at UTT.
Oh, right.
Okay,
right.
so we have to kind of be aware that past a certain age bracket, because there was no tertiary education available, and because
Yes.
once you take that step to tertiary education abroad, you end up with reverse culture shock that is real when you come back to Trinidad. And you've lost some touch with your networks, and your networks are amateurs.
Yeah.
So there's only
coming
so
back
much,
is
yeah.
rough. Coming back is rough.
Because you would have fundraised to go abroad, right? They
Yes.
would have been very clear and limited in terms of time goals.
And you can always sell tickets to a fundraiser. It's much harder to sell tickets for a professional performance.
Right, yeah.
Right? So also our audience is accustomed to viewing amateur performances. And I will say, earlier this year, I gave a concert. The French embassy asked me to do a recital of all French songs. And the response was so confused. I'm serious. I got a lot of people coming up like, how did you do that? How
Really?
did you?
I'm so confused.
How did you memorize all of those songs? How did you, because they don't,
They're not used to it.
no,
They're not accustomed.
they've never experienced it. How would you know?
So that's-
Because the
I mean,
first half,
we've had people singing in foreign languages locally.
No, yeah,
but it's an
but
entire
not
recital.
the same.
Right.
It's an
All
entire
her.
recital, and the first half I wasn't amplified. Okay?
Yeah, well, that and all
So
they probably
it's
really
classical, so people are not used to these things.
And each song has a different personality,
Yeah.
has a different character, has a different message. And what we
Yes.
did is we used projection to project the, like, you know, sort of a compressed idea of what the poetry was about. or the-
like
the-
an image projector.
yeah, of image projection.
Yeah, to give
that-
some a
that-
visual cue.
Yeah, so if you weren't French speaking, you still had you knew what was
Yeah.
going on. And so they could engage with it. And it was just me and a pianist. There's no need for Technicolor, there's no need for smoke
big thing.
machines and light effects and, you know,
Because it
dancers.
didn't require that.
If
It
you
didn't
don't,
require
yeah,
that.
if a singer is trained in how to command the
Yeah.
interest of an audience and how to tell a story,
Right.
which again, I mean, people are like, oh, you're so talented. No, I'm trained.
I've never heard a more positive self-deprecating statement in my life. No, it's not that I'm talented, I'm trained.
But go back to
You
the
know,
audience.
it's so simple, even a caveman can do it.
You know, you don't expect a footballer to kick small goal football and then get pulled up by,
By
you know, some
recruiters and stuff,
recruiters
right.
and take. No, you know that at some point they have to go be trained.
Yes.
And even at that point, it's not. You know, it's not automatic that they're
Right.
going to end up on a national team or,
Yeah.
you know, because these things are hard.
So now we're sort of training our audience because, as you mentioned, the projection, our audience is not used to, one, a full program in a foreign language. Two, they're not used to a program and reading the thing beforehand so that they can be informed.
Yes.
They can be informed because
And
that's,
again,
that's
like
usually
even
what happens
that whole
internationally.
reading the program beforehand, it's not necessary in 2025.
Correct.
Like, there's no reason.
If you just project it onto a screen.
Yeah, we have technology. Use it.
Yes,
Use
yes,
it. Why
yes.
are we still wasting
People.
trees? Why are we still cutting down trees to
I
make
mean,
programs?
you can make an app for programs. That's
Yes,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can.
there's a
You
QR
can.
there's a
You
QR
can.
code and
But
people-
I like the projection because then it means that the focus stays.
Yes.
On the
Because
stage.
if it's on their
Yes.
phone or their
Yes.
tablet,
And then
they're
if you
back
want
and
to, you
forth.
can have imagery that reinforces what's going on, and so you have these capabilities that people are not using yet. And meanwhile, we also have a really, I think, toxic culture of trying to appear to be professional while representing things that are not actually happening in real time. And this is not just locally, there's, you know, lip sync culture is all through pop music, all through, and it gives it gives people a false impression of what a live performance even feels like.
Yes.
Because a live performance should feel like it's happening in the moment,
Yes.
which once you are using pre-recorded vocals, that performer is now just simply trying to recreate something they did weeks ago in the theater.
Right. It's a
different energy, and they have to limit their expression to fit that rhythm.
Yes.
And you can't adjust. You can't adjust to anything.
Because,
you can't adjust to anything that goes
because
wrong.
once we get onto the stage, I was telling somebody, you know, once you've done the work, once you're on stage, it's playtime.
Yes.
So if you do that sort of thing, you're not allowed to play. Your elbows are kind of like this, and you have to stay in it.
And it also, the performers that get accustomed to performing like that also don't learn the mental, it's the mental durability of recognizing that once you're on stage, things often do not go 100% correct. But that's a part of live performance. And the audience loves it. The audience loves it when you know the performer laughs off something that happens, or they can
It reminds the audience that you're human.
That you're human.
And that
And
they
they
get
are
a connection.
human. And there's a connection that happens right there. And so it's not perfection that the stage wants. And that live performance connection is not about perfection. It's about connection.
Exactly. And I think that's, I mean, coming from having the classical training, I think that's something that we get, some people have the wrong perception of classical music because, yes, the goal is perfection, but as classical musicians, we really don't take ourselves as seriously as you know, because it's not this sort of stiff sort of become a caricature of something.
Over-reliance on background tracks or backing tracks, right, in commercial pop music. Because even rap artists have like backing tracks for their solo rap line. I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Right?
And again, like, I mean, there is flexibility between genres, and flexibility between genres means that the expectations for classical performance are not the same as the expectations for a soca performance.
For sure.
Don't ask me to walk up a crowd. Okay, I cannot do it. It's not going to happen, and I highly respect people who can, right? That is a different genre completely. The expectations are different.
No, but even with pop music, what you're saying about connection. Yes, there are technical reasons why at times you will use a backup track, but it's not necessary 100% of the time.
No,
and part of the skill.
If you look at recordings of very talented pop artist from the 2000s, from 1999. There was one I actually showed my husband just a couple days. Whitney Houston. There is a performance that she did of I Shall Always Love You. That legitimately you get goosebumps all through it because she is stopping, she's communicating with the audience.
I don't know if you remember TLC, the group. They made a comment, and I think I saw it on Behind the Music, right? Where basically like, we were the only ones that thought you actually have to sing and dance at the same time. But it's like, that is a skill, and when you could do it, right? Because there are ways to not use a backing track. I think Beyonce and a lot of pop stars now, they use backup singers to kind of fill in the gaps. But they at the very least strategically know, hey, my big note can't be a pre-recorded note. My big moments have to be me every night.
And again, once you have dancers, then the rhythmic flexibility cannot be as flexible because they are moving. So again, you know, different genres, different expectations. And so we have to be careful not to disparage other genres by trying to hold them up to our standards. Because if someone asked me to do an aerobics routine while I performed any of my operatic arias, you'd be sadly disappointed. Right?
I do wonder, one day someone's going to do it. It's not impossible.
Listen, I have
because they can.
there's some wild things on the internet. Everyone is trying to make a viral moment.
Side note, because we've spoken about this before, one of the things, and I think it's even more annoying than any local lip syncing. It's we're going to sing in our kitchen and we're going to have perfect pitch and all of our waveforms are going to be perfectly, so consistent, it's a straight line, right?
But this is also the issue with autotune because we are so accustomed, our ears now are so accustomed to the sound of autotune that a lot of young singers that start with me are unaware of what vibrato sounds like. And vibrato is just a thing that a healthy throat does when sustaining a pitch, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what it sounds like if we don't hear it. And that used to be a normal thing in popular music until autotune scrubbed it out. And these days I've actually seen people in the studio trying to have the vocalist in the studio take the vibrato out, which is pointless because they could do that if they wanted to. But the singer, meanwhile, is actually hurting their throat
that's a good thing.
by scrubbing the vibrato out entirely.
I was coaching some artists, and I told them, listen, the producer, have some sort of vocal coach or somebody that you trust with your voice inside of the room, because the producer is just going based off of sound, based off of the sound that they want.
And what they know how to get the sound.
What they think they know how to get the sound.
Yes.
No,
right?
but
So,
they're right. They just don't know that it could be harmful long term to the voice.
right.
So there's a misunderstanding of the health of the instrument and how to get the voice to do what it needs to do.
Just because it sounds good doesn't mean that it's necessarily healthy.
Right. We can make a lot of really good sounds that hurt like hell.
Meanwhile, I just want to, I understand pop uses lip syncing, but even in Korea, that has a lot of lip syncing at times. The fan base are like, no. We want to hear the live singing. We want to, like, one of the things they judge their performers on vocal stability. Like, not just can you make the note, but when you're singing the line, how stable is the line, so that everything is clear. Like, they're interested in that. This is a pop audience, right? So. And the artists that are able to be like, yes, I could do all this singing and dancing, and I'm not like, my vocals are still coming out supported, clear, on pitch, and the audience will pick up on that and appreciate that and point that out and put a premium on that.
Well, again, that's come back to being trained, right? So when you're trained to do those sorts of things, when you're trained because they are trained, there's a certain level of endurance because there's physical work in the live performance, right? So we kind of touched on the sort of industry standards of the perform, but in terms of like the administration, you made a good point about the management and the board sort of being at loggerheads. Sometimes in administrative works, you don't always have artist representation on the administrative side of it, which can be very, very tricky to navigate because they are making administrative decisions, not administrative decisions for artists.
Which is why industry has agents, right?
Yes, but that is at all levels because if you look even at what is happening with, say, Spotify and how much money they spend on artists and how they are actually acting like the artists are now, replaceable in this day and age. Do we actually need them anyway to create these things? I think at some point, artists need to realize that if an industry is treating you not like a stakeholder, but like a cow to be milked, then we can choose what parts of the industry we feel respected in. And I do think, for me personally, that's why I'm not really interested in the recording industry. I see the recording industry as a 100-year experiment. Music industry is timeless, right? It's prehistory. Prehistory, right? So I don't actually think that you need necessarily to engage with the recording industry if it's not benefiting you professionally.
Do you anticipate they're going to try, part of why they're saying that is AI, because a lot of artistic fields are concerned that AI will replace them, from academic literary work to visual artistry, and to some extent I've even seen like someone had an AI do a sitcom. Right? Yeah. And it actually played off pretty well. Now, probably had a lot of processing power to not have a limp arm dangling in the wrong spot. But in theory, you could get the voice from the AI, because you can sample voices. You get the lyrics from the AI, right? You could get the visuals from the AI. But everything that I've seen, even at the cutting edge of pop music, is, no, it's the personality of the real individual and their real skill that is what's going to sell well, in this case, the K-pop groups to their audience, or Taylor Swift to her audience. Like, how do you replace Taylor Swift and her whole everything with some soulless AI? How do you see it?
For me personally, I see AI as a tool. It is a tool I prefer not to use, but it's mostly, for me personally, it's an ethical choice, because the farming of resources to create the AI has not compensated the individuals who created that work that they are training the AI on.
Right.
And now, 10,
Just
20 years
explain.
ago, we call that piracy.
Yes.
And people were arrested.
Yes.
And charged and fined.
I want to explain it to the audience. When you say farming, it is the AI will take samples of human outputs,
Yes.
artistic
They gather
work.
things from different
So
sources.
when you use AI to say update our logo for our brand, it's because an artist made the brand, and the AI could make derivatives of that.
Yeah. They've actually, I mean, SoundCloud has made their entire audio library available for AI farming, which means that anybody who uploaded their music to SoundCloud, which I did probably about a decade ago, my music is now training AI. So why would I want to take that AI and use it for something? I think that that is unethical.
But I mean, does that just bring up the question, what is art?
I think it's more than what is art. It's what are we willing to pay for? What is worth? Yeah, what is worth our time to create, and what is a skill that might be necessary in the future that we are actually dulling our senses by allowing this tool to pretend that it can do it, because it's not actually creating anything. It's just splicing things together.
Yes.
It's producing nonsense in terms of literary work. It's producing it's hallucinating references.
Yeah. It might go good for like a verse, but if you want a full concept with a conclusion, then things get dicey.
And again, I will say that what has made it easier for that to happen is the pop industry that has dumbed down the vocabulary and the musical expression over the past decade especially, right? Which again coincided with a lot of like antitrust laws in the radio stations and monopoly laws in the US that were taken away in interest of big business making money, which is again why I come back to that idea. Like if I feel like I'm just being treated like a raw material as opposed to an artist who should have some creative control, I'm going to withdraw myself from that part of the industry.
So then the next, because I hear that and automatically I said, okay, you know what, I'm probably going to forge my own path, but that's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you have to wear the many hats, at least until you get that team. Speaking of the many hats, you started off saying, and this is an important question for me, you started off saying that we feel like we have to do everything in order to be, in order to exist in the space. Do you think, but you do have to start off like that at some point, but then you sort of have to let go the reins once you start collaborating with people, once you start hiring people. But do you think some hold on, and I don't just mean anyone of a particular generation, but do you think, you know what, I'm doing all of this, this is my key to success? Do you think if they feel like, do you think that they have to let go all of these things?
Oh yeah, of course. You know, and I think we have again, it's a filtering. We have to learn to filter voices, because a lot of times it's not even our own inner voice that's asking us to continue doing what we're doing. It's actually external voices. It's fans, it's parents, it's uncles, it's the community. It's people that you work with that want you to do a thing.
Why don't you do this again? Because you did it last year?
Yes, right. And I will say, I mean, after I finished my bachelor's degree and I came back to Trinidad, I was at like a family function, and a cousin of mine who is a professional in his own field, but I don't think he can sing a note. I don't think he's ever tried. Sat me down and was like, "You should be doing musical theater." And I'm like, okay, so I've been training half my life for classical, but, and so I thought, I mean, in the moment, I didn't have a single thing to say. But when I thought about it afterwards, I was just like, that's like going to an accountant and saying, you should do something else, because you know what? I need someone to do, I need someone to balance, you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, it's like I tell people, it's like, just because he works on cars doesn't mean he could do everything on a car. Just because I know how to use my computer doesn't mean I know how to solve all your problems in the computer. I'm not an IT guy.
Right, or like if I go to my dentist and I'm like, my foot's been hurting.
Exactly.
But it's like these are not the same thing. And I've had specialists for half my life helping me and guiding me, and now you, who has no idea about this particular industry, wants to tell me what to do.
Right, so you mentioned that coming back to the point that you made, we're sort of in this negotiation phase. Are we in this negotiation phase with the public as well, in terms of how they perceive what we do, because they're not either that informed of the very subsects of the entire industry, just because you're saying the nuances of it, nuances of just being a singer or being a singer and a producer or being a singer and doing other things in addition to it. They're just unaware.
As well as I think we also are in a really unique negotiation phase where we can, as people who are trained in foreign art forms, we can take our own unique world experience and history and flavor and now apply it back to the things we've learned. And we are in a unique part of history where we could be creating more with our own music.
Not just creating more, but you're at a point where you could start laying the foundations to set the expectations on what the industry is moving forward.
It's an exciting time. And I think rather than approaching it with fear, I think we should be approaching it with, with interest and curiosity, and I think, and I consider myself one of the mature ones, leaving room for young people who want to try something new and helping to guide them and allowing them to make their own decisions that fail, if they're going to fail, experience things, make their own decisions. And some of those decisions I probably won't agree with, but that's okay, because I had my time making my own mistakes, and I've talked to other people my age and older, and yes, we all, know what it's like to do a concert and have it bust. It's not the end of the world unless you mortgage the house.
Yeah. But part of it is you need to learn your own lessons, and every now and then sometimes, hey, they might actually have it right, and all of the experience might have read it wrong.
Yeah.
But is it any fair, like, listening to you, it sounds as though you were very responsible with your career, right? And you always grew stably, right? Is there any fear that as, the education side is accelerating, as I said earlier, and the industry obviously can't just absorb and like, here's just jobs for everybody, right? No, to some extent, people have to make their own jobs similar to what you had to do. You have to find your own space. And there might be the risk that things might kind of grow too quickly, because that usually is when people get into trouble, when things start to overextend.
Yeah. To be honest, I think with more unique creativity, I think the audience will grow. And what I mean by that is, if everyone is imitating each other and imitating foreign artists, then every single weekend you go out and you experience the same thing, you're going to stop going out. You're going to say, well, I did that 6 months ago. Do I really need to do it again? Or, okay, well, I'll do this once a year at Christmas because I like this feeling at Christmas. But you're not going to keep experiencing that all year, because there's nothing new to experience unless creators are given the personal agency to try and create unique things, unique experiences for their audience. So if one weekend you go out and it's a jazz show and everybody's danced up to the, dressed up to the nines, and next week maybe you feel like going and taking in a recital and it's quiet and there's, translations on the board, and the next week you want to take in an amateur choir and you want to support someone. And it means then that you just have a more thriving musical economy.
Because it's diverse in its product.
Yes, and so this is why, around, there's a carnival product, and I think the mistake we make is trying to make that carnival product last all year long.
Yeah.
I think we should be giving, especially younger creators, space to create new experiences with new performers and get to know those new performers rather than just relying on the things that have been working for 4 decades.
But also, because every bar will play some sort of soca dancehall, as opposed to not even saying, well, this week, that week, but what if there was a spot for jazz?
And there are.
Spot for,
and there are.
Yes.
I think you if you want to sit and listen to guitar music while you eat, there are restaurants that have that chill vibe, and and certainly, you know, when I go out and I'm choosing a bar with my friends, usually we walk until we find that we can talk and not have to shout, right? Because I actually like my friends, so I want to hear what they have to say.
You need your voice for work, so you can't afford to lose it, right?
Yeah, there's that, right? But no, I mean, I do think that there is a space for more quiet, reflective, and you know, I don't like to use the word. I don't like to use the word serious, but I would call it more like immersive, reflective performances, and also, even when it comes to classical music, I'm always, usually when I have a performance, I try to include as many funny things as possible, and I try to vary the emotions because, you know, soca is like kind of always happy, but when I have a sit-down recital, it's not going to be always sad. Right, it's going to have emotions that dip and you know, fluctuate, because that is, you know, the part of the storytelling that is in that genre. So I make sure that whatever recital I do has that variations, because that's the strength of that genre. Right. So we have to make sure that, and I always kind of try to point this out to people when they're planning recitals that involve classical music. Please, for the love of God, don't make sure that the classical music is not the most boring thing on your program, always. Right? It's doing a disservice to the genre and to your capabilities as an artist.
If you all knew how hilarious classical music can be, and the characters we get to play, the sounds we get to make, the noise we get to make, it's very, very interesting.
But also, I think it goes back to the assumption, no, classical music is serious, so we have to prove that we are more serious than these soca and these pop and these jazz and all of these young people music.
You know who says that? Who? Amateurs.
Well, I will say this as well. There's a kind of a part of vocal training history that people don't necessarily realize that they're reacting to, and that is that I would say like 20 years ago, go further back, vocal training was very different, okay? There was not as much technology and science applied to the voice. And so there are a lot of vocal habits. Yeah, there are a lot of vocal habits and vocal techniques that were a part of that culture that are no longer a part of the culture anymore, because we know that it doesn't help. And one of those things is singers used to be told, and this was also actors as well, stage actors used to be told that you should always speak the way you plan to sing and speak on stage. So you notice I'm talking quite normally right now, but if I was singing, what I would be doing is I'd be opening up my pharynx. So it means that a certain generation of singers and actors talk a little bit like this, and it makes them seem like a little bit, you know, a little bit strange, right? You know, it's not exactly appealing. Yeah. But unfortunately, if you do that for 20 years and you're convinced that that is helping, it becomes your personality.
Yeah. There's some implications there we're not going to spell out. We're just not.
So it is also something that I think subliminally puts a block between.
Yeah. So it's in generations.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen, it was a great conversation. I really, really appreciate coming here. I appreciate the discussion.
I just want to say, folks, this is the G-rated version of the conversation, and I'll leave it at that. I just couldn't help but throw that out there.
Stupid!
There's so much more that can be said.
I know, but that's all we're doing. We're out of time.
I'm really controversial one, understand.
Yes, you are. Relax yourself.
Couldn't help myself.
I know. And that's why I said, thank God it's only one.
No, you're the one that should be cloned. Let's not forget.
Oh, fine.
To help you with every concert, just to do all of the grunt work.
Please don't answer. Please don't answer.
Tempting.
Don't worry, science will get there. Science will get there.
My goodness,
we just need to freeze prime Mark so that when technology catches up, we get him in his 20s.
Luckily, Mark is training little clones, right?
Yes.
You're training clones. Yeah. That's what our students are.
Listen. But if you know Mark, folks, and I know enough of Mark to know that at best he's getting like, you know, like when you take a copy of a copy, it's just not that good. Right? This is the original.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
You
Mark was like a fully formed adult at like 19, right? So like not a lot of his mini-me's are gonna be on that level.
Listen, you are absolutely terrible. But no, I enjoy the
You
things.
see, he can't admit it. But to some extent, you know what I say is true.
Natalia, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was great conversation. But I hope that this conversation sort of continues nationally to sort of improve our industry standards, improve how we do things, not just in terms of talent, well, not just in terms of training, but in terms of things on the administrative level, things on the technical level, relying on people, other people to do the things to a timely manner.
But
and
also
effectively.
appreciation for artists.
And also appreciation.
And valuing
Yes.
financially
Yes.
their talents.
Yes.
Theirs, not mine.
It's a weird, as you said, it's a weird negotiation space that we're in, and I think it's just a matter of walking through it and instilling all of the things, the values, the skills, all of those things, and improving it as we go along, and hopefully the industry can catch up with the skills and the training of everybody that's being released from the institutions. So
That sound like crazy people. Like
we are.
we essentially are. A little bit sus.
From the tertiary level institutions, let me correct myself.
Oh wait, sorry. Is this like all the buzzwords? Is that what happened? Because I'm not accustomed to artist man theaters, industry buzzwords. You know, so to me it sounded fine. If it was politics, I'll be all on top of that.
Yeah, no. It's just we're an interesting bunch.
Lots of slogans.
We're an interesting bunch.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm getting yelled at in my ear. Ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Breakthrough right here on WESN. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
WESN